Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maddie Hennessy. I'm with the Automotive Service and Tire Alliance, and we're here with our monthly Lunch and Learn chat with ATI. I have coaches Kim Hickey and Rick Johnson. I'm going to pass it over to Rick.
Well, hello, everybody. My name is Rick Johnson. I've been in the automotive business for a little over 30 years. I own my own shop in Nebraska for 23 years and have been coaching for ATI now for 14 years. And I want to welcome you today and hope we can bring you some interesting things. And so, Kim, I'll let you introduce yourself.
So I am Kim Hickey. I am a former shop owner. We call that a recovering shop owner. We can't get it out of our blood. So now we coach because we couldn't give up the automotive life. So do we not been with ATI as a member or coach for, gosh, I think since 2003. Obviously, I've only been in the automotive industry for like 5 years, so I won't say how long that. So, but anyway, we are delighted to be here with you and hope that you have some takeaways from this, and just very excited to be here. So thank you for having us.
Okay. Well, today what I wanted to talk to you about was running your business by the numbers and not by the emotions. And why would I say that? Well, because I've found that emotions lie to you and get you in trouble. Feels like we're doing okay. I think next week's going to be a better week. It's just emotions. It doesn't mean anything, right? There's no data to support that.
Well, Rick, we see that all the time, right? When we speak to somebody and they're like, oh, I thought it was dead this week. And then I looked at the numbers at the end of the week and we had a record week, or vice versa. We felt so busy, but then when we did our sales report, we didn't have hardly any sales, right?
Yeah, you hear that. Like, man, last week just kicked my butt, and then I looked at the numbers and gosh, it was a loss. How can that be, right? So yeah, very good. And, thinking of why it's important to run by the numbers and not the emotions, I've found over the years that the most important number to most shop owners is what, Kim? Can you tell me when you're coaching, what's the number one thing they want to look at right away? Net profit.
Their NOPE, as we call it.
The NOPE, net operating profits. You either have some or you have NOPE. So, and an awful lot goes into achieving that NOPE that the shop owner wants and needs. And it always amazes me how they just seem to focus on the bottom line and they don't pay attention to everything that goes into that net profit that's above the bottom line. And I think we need to take a look into a couple things today that I think could be helpful to us to discover what's above that line that we can address by numbers and the metrics and KPIs and try to take some of the emotions out of it. So,
Rick, I just want to give everybody an analogy. When you think about like a GPS, right, in your vehicle, you have to put an endpoint and know where the destination is, right? And so if you can kind of think about the net operating profit as the destination where you want to get to, but there's waypoints along the way, right? The GPS tells you where to go and where to turn, how many miles this is coming up ahead. And if we don't pay attention to those waypoints and check-ins to get to our destination, we won't get there. And so you can't ignore all of the numbers and the things that go into it, right? Or you're never going to achieve your goal.
Correct. Yes, I agree with that. That's a very good analogy.
Thank you.
It reminds me of the book that we read as kids, right? Alice in Wonderland, and the Cheshire Cat up in the tree. And Alice comes to the fork in the road and said, which path should I take? And the cat said, well, where are you going? And she said, I don't really know. And he said, well, then it doesn't matter. Right? So the GPS, your shop, it does matter, right? We need to know where we're going, and to be able to apply the tools to help us get there is very important. So it's surprising how many members do run the business by the emotions, and kind of backs on what Kim said earlier, but I often hear from the shops I work with, and they let their sales tracking system fall behind a month or two. And I ask them, well, how are things going? Are you doing okay? You have money in the bank? Well, it seems like we're doing okay. Feels like we're busy. The techs seem to be working really hard. Then they finally catch up. They enter the numbers, right? They start catching up the P&Ls and different things. And you find out for the last 2 months, they've been losing $1,000 a week. How does that feel that you're doing well when you're losing $1,000 a week, you know? So again, just another example of why we've got to watch the numbers. And so in order to reach that desired note, that net profit, we really got to focus on the KPIs. Now, KPIs is simply key performance indicators. It's the metrics of the shop, the margins that are needed to get us there. And I wanted to take a little time and look at a few of those today to help you do some discovery and help you to set that GPS to get you to what you need on that bottom line. And so I would encourage you to take notes, check your numbers when you get home, and see how you're doing.
Rick, you mentioned a really important piece to this, and that is monitoring your numbers and whatever system that you have to do that. You need to make sure that you have some kind of a tool, because you know, we've all heard that saying, if you can't measure it, we can't manage it, right? And often shop owners are very busy and they don't pay attention to the numbers and they don't like them and all of that. And they wait till the end of the month and they look at the report and they're like, holy cow, my sales went down or my GP went down or any of those numbers. And there's not enough time to respond and create a course correction. So it's really important to be keeping an eye on that at all times, right? Whether you're looking at it, daily reports and then weekly and so on, because you want to be able to right that wrong or correct that course, but before 30 days is gone and you know, we had all that loss, right?
Correct. I agree, Kim. And I think that personally, I mean, when my shop was doing the best is when I was looking at them daily and doing daily repair order audits and making sure that I was getting what I needed to help the overall bottom line. So one of the things, Kim, I thought we'd talk about was that drastically affects our net profit is our effective labor rate. We call it ELR. You'll probably hear me refer to that and Kim as well today. But the effective labor rate is far more important than your door rate. Just for a quick example, if your shop labor rate's $100 an hour and you credit your technicians 100 hours for the week, then you would expect that you build out $10,000 in labor for that week. If you did, then your effective labor rate is $100 an hour. However, if you credit the technicians 100 hours and you only bill out $8,715 in labor, your effective labor rate is really only $8,715 for that week. It doesn't matter what your door rate is. Your labor rate that week is $8,715. Now, that's $12.85 an hour off your door rate. And that may not seem like a lot, but if you're running 2 hours per repair order, that $12.85 times 2 hours is now 20 some dollars an hour, right? Actually $25.70. You take that times 50 cars a week, and that's $1,285 that you're not putting on the bottom line just because you didn't hold your effective labor rate. Annually, that's over $60,000. That's a lot of money that we're not getting because we've let our effective labor rate erode, which is your net profit, right? You've already paid the techs, you've paid the parts bills, you've paid the fixed expenses. Whose money is that, Kim?
That is your money in your pocket. So that's such a huge distinction that I think that people don't think about, that difference between your effective labor rate and your door rate. That is right to the bottom line, right into your pocket, because as you said, everything has been already paid for. So it's just over and above what went out. And some of the other things I think people don't realize, you know, it's always fun. We like to have sometimes in class, everybody calculate what their actual effective labor rate is when you're doing an oil service. If your tech's spending, you know, an hour on it and you're charging $23 or whatever for labor, you have a $23 an hour rate is what you're actually collecting, right? Regardless if your door rate's $150.
Right.
Same thing when we give any kind of a discount, whether that's AAA or veterans or senior citizens or whatever. It's the difference between what are you actually collecting and billing instead of, that door rate. So don't be misled by that. And that's something to really look at and think about and measure. So if you don't have a way to calculate your effective labor rate, let us know. You can email Rick or I at the end and we can kind of walk you through it. But it's very important to understand the difference. Same thing with canned jobs. The same thing. If you have a reduced rate for that labor, that's what you're actually collecting, and your door rate is totally out the window.
Yeah, you're right. And certainly it's something you want to keep an eye on every day, for sure, not at the end of the month. So we need to come up with some ways of how we can fix that effective labor rate, right? And monitor it and correct it. And so there's a few ideas. There's an awful lot of ideas out there. We can't go over them all today, but one of the simplest things is a labor matrix, similar to a parts matrix. It's a labor matrix. One of the advantages, and see, I'm old enough that I walked uphill to school both ways, right? So
in the snow.
In the snow, yeah. So back in the day when I had my shop management system didn't have a labor matrix feature. It had the parts matrix, but not the labor matrix. So it was a little harder to do. So that's my excuse. But most systems today have the labor matrix feature. I know of several that do. And so certainly you want to get that labor matrix set up and get it applied. And that will help several dollars an hour. Kim, I don't know what you see typically, but I see a big uptick in the shops I work with when they get that labor matrix set up and set up right.
Absolutely, because our goal is for our members is to have at least a 1-to-1, 100% effective labor rate to door rate. And, using a labor matrix is one of them. And I want to address that for a moment, because everybody sort of uses a labor matrix now, whether they just don't call it that. When you have people talking about it, and sometimes when they first hear the concept of I can't charge more than the book time says, or I can't whatever, we have to remember that the book time is a guide. If you look at Mitchell and all data and they're all different. There's not one of them that are the same. There is that for sure. So it's a guide. And secondly, most of the advisors that don't use quote unquote a set labor matrix, they round up. So if something's 2.8 or 2.9, they round it up to 3 hours, right? Or, if it's 2.3, sometimes they round it up to 2.5. So in essence, they're using a labor matrix, but it's not consistent. And then what happens with that starts to erode not only your profit margins, but your brand. Because if a customer comes in, and has a job done, and Rick, you quote it as a service advisor and you round up from 2.3 to 2.5, but somebody else that's working at the counter doesn't round it up that same amount. They only round it up when it's 2.4. Then you really get into some murky waters there, right? It's left up to everybody's opinion, and we all know what happens with that. We'll leave the whole let's assume joke out and just go with an opinion, right? So this also ensures consistency across the board, and it protects your brand, not only your margins, right?
Yes, that's correct. The secret of success is consistency of purpose. And so that plays right into that, being consistent. And that labor matrix will help you achieve that, no matter who's writing a ticket. And so Kim touched on canned jobs, and I do have a little example on that. And this was a personal situation, because every mistake you can make, I've made 4 or 5 times in my shop, and I've got 4 or 5 t-shirts in the same color to say that. But the canned job is, if you're $100 an hour, we're using that for easy math, and you pay a technician an hour to do that job, say a transmission service, you have to charge $100 an hour. I mean, it seems like duh, right? But we get into this, well, I got to be real competitive on this, so I'm only going to charge $50, but I can't hurt my technician, so I'm going to pay him an hour. What have you done, Kim? You've cut your effective labor rate to $50 an hour, right? You can't do that. You've got to get real with your canned jobs. You have to make sure you've got them adjusted and set properly. And all this stuff does is it continues to help add to your bottom line net profits.
Can I just want to
Sure.
interject on that. That's another pushback or concerns we get when we speak to shop owners that, you know, I can't not pay my tech any less, you know, but you need to have those conversations, those hard conversations with your internal customers, right? And say, listen, we're not competitive with this in this market. I would like to be able to offer a can job or, you know, discount it slightly so we're competitive on these maintenance items. In order to bring in more of these maintenance items, which everybody refers to as gravy and, you know, all of that. And so if you want the gravy, we have to be more competitive to bring more in. So, you know, we need to kind of split the difference. We can't just discount it and everybody, you know, still get paid the same or whatever. And you know, I would say 99% of the time, the shop owners, when they have that honest conversation and they give their team, you know, a choice and say, we could keep it priced like this and not have any gravy work, or we could become a little bit more competitive, share in that little bit less of the labor we're bringing in and have a lot more of this work for you. And hands down, they choose, because it has to always, when we make decisions, the criteria, right? If people call it the three-legged stool or whatever, has to be good for the car, has to be good for the customer, and it's got to be good for the shop, right? It's got to meet all of that. And so if not, it's not fair, right? And so, you know, the other thing too about raising labor rates for the shop, you know, a big part of having a good effective labor rate is having the proper door rate, right? We have to start from somewhere. And, you know, you cannot be afraid to charge accordingly for what you need, to pay your technicians, you know, the wages that they deserve, be able to provide them with the benefits of, you know, PTO, and, you know, some shops pay for uniforms or lawn service or, you know, other benefits, you know, workers' comp, all of those things that go with it, retirement. We have to look at that and start there and say, you know, we got to build a labor rate that is tall enough to support paying the wages and the benefits that our technicians and our service advisors deserve, right? And then from there, we look at how do we maintain that labor rate, right, with the effective labor rate. So I just wanted to bring that up because we do get a little like, holy cow, I can't, you know, can't charge that, or we can't raise our rate, or we can't try to do, you know, make them match. So I just wanted to make that little distinction.
Well, that's fantastic, Kim. And just another reason why, when you sit down to look at your labor rate, we have a labor rate analysis tool. You plug in real numbers for you. They're not what your competitor down the street's numbers are different than yours, right? We have to understand that. And you have to take the emotions out of that. I know I'm going to beat that to death, but you have, oh my God, I don't think, well, there you go. That's an emotion, right? Well, oh my gosh, people, no, that's what your labor rate needs to be. That's what your labor rate needs to be, right? No emotions.
Exactly.
It's all business, right? So, okay, very good. And today, you know, we're seeing labor rates that I didn't think I'd see, you know, and they're continuing to go up because of many factors, right? But that's a whole nother conversation.
Well, I think it was about two and a half years ago or 3 years ago, before COVID even hit, that we said, boy, within 3 years, we predicted that labor rates are going to be darn near close to $200, if not more. And we sure are seeing that throughout the country. And it's amazing. I'm so happy to see that, because, you know, people are finally seeing the value that they offer and, you know, asking for that, and they should.
Yes, sir. Ma'am, I mean, excuse me. Okay, well, so, you know, we discussed the labor matrix, and I think we all understand what that is, and most of us have that in our systems. Another thing that surprisingly can fix effective labor rate, Kim, is communication. You know, and you might be thinking, how can communication help effective labor rate? Well, let me explain. Getting all the information from the customer, all of his concerns on the repair order, is critical. Then making sure that Mr. Technician communicates all he needs to do to fix the car and the concerns on the repair order, and that you communicate to the customer, is beyond critical. You know, actually being able to bill and charge the customer for all the hours you work on his car, Doesn't seem like rocket science, but boy, can that be a challenge. How many times I heard in my shop and from shops I work with now, well, it took us 6 hours, but gosh, I can't charge 6 hours. I'm only going to charge 2. Why? And when you dig into it, well, Mr. Technician didn't tell us he was working on it that long, or he went deeper than he should have, or the service writer didn't call and get approval for the extra 3 hours he worked. You know, it's just communication. And so it's astounding when you can really start billing for every hour you work, how much more net profit you have, right? But you have to communicate. Kim, I'm sure you've seen that with your members. You've had them tell you how they worked on a car extra hours and weren't able to bill for it. And you know what that does to the effective labor rate, right?
Absolutely. And, technicians are very prideful and they want to do a good job, and they get stuck on something and they're just like, I need 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes. I could get this figured out, just 2 more minutes. So that's why another to help protect your effective labor rate and to make sure everybody is being compensated fairly for the work they're doing, both the technician and the shop, is having diagnostic levels and rates, and that the service advisor is well trained on those. And so for example, a lot of our shops have like 3 or 4 different diagnostic rates with the service advisor. When Rick comes in and brings the car and says, oh, my light is out in the dome or something, we could probably start with a diagnostic level 1 and say, our diagnostic starts at this. We can, we'll start with a level 1 and go from there. But where we see people run into those big problems is a customer comes in, they're like, oh my gosh, my car hasn't run properly for 6 months or whatever. I heard from everybody in town that you guys are the best and can figure out everything, right? So our egos go, wee, that's us. We can fix anything. We can fix anything. And so we take those jobs in, right? Because as soon as they say, you guys are the best, that's what I heard. And then we start at, what's your diagnostic level? Well, $99 an hour, whatever it is, for level 1, which we say don't sell by the hour, but that's a whole other conversation. Well, my gosh, if a car has been not working for 6 months, been at 5 other shops, whatever, that's just silly to start out with, a level 1, or say, oh, our diag starts at $100. You need to be smart about it and understand and say up front, from what you're describing to us, we need to start with a level X. You've had it at all these places and all these people look at it and they haven't been able to do anything. I'm confident that our trained technicians will be able to handle this, but here's where we're looking at starting. And so if the customer is like, whoa, I'm not going to start at a $200 diagnostic or $300, whatever your level is, then we know that's probably not a good job for us to take, right? Because we're going to wind up working on that for 6 hours and getting paid for 1, which is not fair for the technicians or anybody else or the shop. So we have to have that, transparency up front and have that laid out. So that's really important too, is to make sure you have your diagnostic levels set up.
Excellent points. Now, I have a way to help increase communication. In fact, if you follow this tool, it'll fix 90% of the problems when it comes to these things. Kim, would you be interested in me sharing that?
I would love for you to share that.
Okay. It's called the 4 C's, and it's concern, cause, correction, and confirmation. And you can email me or Kim after this if you want to get a copy of it. But I would like to briefly go over it. It's just 1 page. And the first C is the concern from the customer. The service advisor is responsible for listening to the customer, obtaining the information, and supporting documentation. It's been to 4 other shops, like Kim said, right? Writing clear, legible, detailed instructions to the technician. Okay. The way I used to explain it to my service writers was, when the technician picks up the job ticket, it's almost like he talked to the customer. He knows exactly what was said. The second C is cause. It's the technician's responsibility to, in writing, put down what's causing the customer's concern. Detailed written description and the procedures taken to determine the cause and then provide the recommended solution. Correction is the third C. The technician is responsible for providing a detailed written description of the work performed and to verify in this description that the problem's been solved. And the fourth C is maybe a little overkill, but confirmation. Everything that works well and the concern's been taken care of. Using the 4 C's, here's what it says. It substantially increases communication between the customer, the advisor, and the technician. There's that three-legged stool, okay? Leading to less misunderstanding, fewer customer complaints, a reduction in comeback, drum roll, and increased net profits. So if you want a copy of this, Kim or I'd be happy to email it to you. Just get a hold of us. Just email us after this, and we'll be glad to send that to you. So another thing that is affecting that bottom line is your parts margins, and that's a hot topic. I know today everybody has a smartphone. They got a tablet. They can sit in your office and easily look up brake pads, starters, alternators. Right, Kim? Have you ever heard that, or is this brand new to you?
Yeah, it used to be I get that cheaper going to the parts store. Now it's I get it cheaper on the internet and so on and so forth. eBay.
Oh, yeah.
eBay was like the first thing, and now it's Amazon. They can get wherever everything online.
Yeah, and so we coach that we want to shoot for a 60% parts margin. Well, how do we achieve that? Well, in theory, it's pretty simple. You implement a parts matrix, you set your shop supplies to 8%, you get that, and you're going to run a 61% parts margin. Okay, now you may need to tweak the shop supplies, you may need to tweak the parts margin a little bit. Kim's got a great tool on figuring out what your average cost of your parts are. I don't remember what you call that tool, Kim, but it's just where you track for a week or two, cost of parts, and you figure out where your sweet spot is, and you make sure that you at least have that area set at a good rate so that you can overall get the 61%. You want to talk about that tool a little bit, Kim?
It's just a spreadsheet, and we can send it out if anybody wants it. But basically, once you set up your tiers and your parts matrix, that you track for a couple of weeks, how many parts come in tier 1, how many come in tier 2, how many in tier 3. And so you might have to make some adjustments, because if all of the parts you buy in the average part you pay for is $100, then are you going to be able to hit your margin with that? So instead of just throwing a blanket, I'm not hitting my overall parts margin, and raising all of the tiers, look at the tiers that you purchase the most parts cost in, right? And so then you can just dial in and make sure that you're making the proper adjustment, instead of just going in and just saying, oh my gosh, I need more parts margin, I'm going to raise all of the parts tiers 20% or whatever. You can really dial in and look at it.
Well, and I think that tool is fantastic because it really does fit what we've started off talking about. You can't manage what you don't measure. And this certainly measures the parts. And so instead of that shotgun approach to just raising prices on everything, you dial in to where it's going to have the most impact. And so that tool was fantastic. I shared that with most of my members and had a lot of good results from that. So, and again, a great tool. So you can't have net profit if your parts margins are lagging. So where are your parts margins? Take a look at it, figure out where you're at, where you want to be, and let's get them fixed. Another thing that takes away from your net profit, and this is kind of a touchy subject too, but it's productivity, because so darn many things can affect your productivity. Broken bolts, parts that don't show up. I've heard there's a part shortage. Okay, blizzards, tool trucks, food trucks, cell phones, smoke breaks, the list goes on, right? So many things can affect our productivity. But the biggest enemy that I see is not setting an expectation with our technicians, not doing a labor inventory, and then tracking it daily and managing it, because guess what? We have to measure what we're going to manage, right? but the technicians don't, a lot of them don't have any idea what we expect. Kim, with your permission, I'd like to tell a personal story about my shop and how productivity was an issue and how we fixed it. Okay. I'm going to do it anyway. So
I know, I'm just kind of surprised that you even asked me.
well, I'm so used to you controlling me. No, I'm kidding. But okay. I had 4 techs and they constantly billed out 100 hours a week. It was just automatic almost. Now, I was not a technician and I never did become a technician. I just felt that I could buy this shop and run it. Well, there's an emotion because, you know, running a business should be easy, right? So
You can
anyway,
take as much sick time as you want. You can pay yourself whatever you want. You can go on vacation whenever you want. You can hire only people you like, all those great things.
I had special briefcases made custom, so I just to haul the money to the bank, and you know it was unreal. But you know, what do we read in that book? I had an entrepreneurial seizure, but anyway, it all turned out okay. Well, I asked my technicians, how come you guys are here 180 hours a week? We work 45 hours a week times 4 is 180, simple math. I said, but we're only billing 100 hours. What's going on? And they said, well, we work on Fords and Chevys and Dodges and Hondas and John Deeres. Okay, if we just worked on one brand, we could bill more hours. Well, I wasn't a tech, and at that time, it sounded reasonable. I thought, oh, okay. It felt like a legitimate reason. There's another emotion popping up, right? Then one day, I signed up for some management training on how to run my shop better and have more profits. And I was told to set expectations with each technician and to track the hours daily on a whiteboard. And funny thing happened. The hours went up immediately. One tech quit right away, and he told me later he quit because he'd been in a shop before that was doing this, and he knew he couldn't hold up to what was going to be coming. And another technician, so after he quit, next week, 100 hours, 3 techs, not 4 techs, 3 techs, right? And about 6 weeks later, I let a guy go, and from then on, my 2 technicians averaged combined 100 hours a week. So half the payroll with the same amount of production. And the funny thing was, we still worked on Fords, Chevys, Dodges, Hondas, John Deeres, airplanes. It didn't matter. These guys became very aware of their hours and very aware of the fact that they needed to produce, you know. And of course, there was more into it with pay plans and things, but
well, that's Parkinson's Law, right? We see that all the time, and that's the work expands to fill the time available for completion. And we've all seen it at our shops. We have a busy day, we're overbooked, and we go out and we say to everybody, listen, holy cow, we are booked. We have to get 20 hours out today, and we only have 8 hours left. And they hunker down and they get it out and get it done. But boy, you ever have a slow day and you only have 4 hours worth of work, and it takes them 8 hours to get 4 hours worth of work done, because the work expands or contracts to the time allotted. And that's what's so important about when you look at what are you charging, right? What are you collecting, using a labor matrix and setting these expectations that you just spoke about. And labor inventory is, I'm going to try not to get on a soapbox but maybe a smidge. Our labor is inventory. We have to sell it. That it does not expire. Time is the only non-renewable asset that we have. So if we don't sell an hour of labor inventory today, we can't sell it next week or the week after like we do with parts, right? It is gone forever, and you never make that up. And it's so important. And it's crazy to me because so many times I'll sometimes talk to our clients and I'll say, holy cow, I'll notice that their productivity is only 50% or whatever, in their portal. And, I'll say, boy, how's stuff going with parts and labor and all, and yada, yada. And, they'll say something about the parts. And I'm like, well, you make sure that you get credit for your parts, right? Like if you buy, 100 filters from Napa, we'll say, do you make sure that Napa delivers 100 hours? Oh, absolutely. Well, what if Napa only brought you 50 filters? I'd be on the phone with Napa in a minute, and I would tell them, where's my filters or where's my money? Then I go, that's kind of odd because you're paying for 100 labor hours of inventory and you're only selling 50. So what's the difference? And there's a disconnect, that we don't think of labor as inventory, but it absolutely is. And it is a number that we need to look at, not based on emotion, right? But, real expectations, what are skill levels, and so on and so forth. So sorry,
No, that was great. And Kim, my coach told me, and because I went through the program, and he told me that my low production was my fault, that it was my fault. And I had to look in the mirror and say, Bubba, this is your fault. You haven't set expectations. You haven't been measuring. You've just been going by the emotions. And it was right. And truthfully, the metrics fixed my productivity, not emotions, And yeah, those hard conversations with technicians about hand jobs and everything, I had to have them. And it all worked out, and it worked out well. So, and there's a lot more metrics and things that we measure that go into that bottom line. But we touched on some of the very big ones today. And so I would like to just say, let's work hard on running your shop by the numbers, right? Set the emotions aside, because what I found out, Kim? You cannot spend emotions. You can only spend. Yeah, you just can't. I can't go to the grocery store and say, hey, I want to buy that sack of groceries with some emotions. They need cash, and I could only find the cash on the bottom line, and the only cash that went there was what I measured and managed and pushed down there. So I'd say get serious with the numbers, cancel the emotions, and you'll see that net profit rise.
The other thing that it just, when you remove the emotion from things, right, it makes accountability and those conversations so much easier, because if you have proper set expectations, you're managing by the numbers and looking, it's a much easier conversation to sit down and say, Rick, buddy, we had your goal at 90% productivity or whatever it is, and you hit 70 this week. What happened? What got in your way? What can we do next week to ensure this doesn't happen? That's a much better conversation and much more effective than, hey, Rick, I really don't feel like you were trying this week, or I don't feel like you put in as much effort as you wanted, or whatever. It makes it much more challenging when you don't have something. And when you think about people in general, we all try very hard most of the time to work, right? And we think that we're doing a good job, and we think we're putting our all in. And so when somebody's like, I don't feel like you really tried this week, wow, like that's holy cow. But if you say to me, here was your goal, we missed it, let's look at and talk about what prevented you from hitting the goal, and what do we do to make sure that doesn't happen next week, right? That's a much better, much more clear conversation, because you can tell people all day long. You think about if you're in a relationship, you have kids, parents, family, anyone, when you don't make things very clear, it could be misconstrued in different ways, right? And then it becomes that it feels like a personal attack instead of here's looking at the numbers, right? And when we say you have to manage by the numbers, that doesn't mean we don't care about our internal customers, and we don't recognize when they do a good job, and we don't celebrate their birthdays, and we don't want to create an environment where everybody feels happy to work there. That's completely different. But when you're making decisions and you're looking at things and having conversations, you need to have the data, right, to back that up, or else it's not clear what people want. And then we get mad that they didn't do what we said when we didn't really line out exactly what was expected, right?
Right. And you might get a little pushback on the numbers if you start tracking the hours. A couple of my guys were like, I don't think that's right, that everybody can see the numbers, And I was like, well, you like to go to football games and stuff? Yeah. Okay. What's that big square thing you constantly looking at all the time? The scoreboard, right? And some stadiums now, it's running yards, passing yards, penalties, time left, timeouts left, the score. I mean, it's data, right? And you're looking at that to determine how's your team doing, right? And so we're a team, right? And I think it's good. It's the only way to go. So you know, I do care about people. I'm not an emotional dead person, right? I don't want that to come across. But if I care about you truly, though, I'm going to use metrics, because that's how I know that you're going to take home that paycheck that you want at the end of the week too, you know. I think we call it compassionate leadership. I care enough that I'm going to track it. Make sense?
Absolutely. That was very well said, because we have to have a way. And if you're not measuring the numbers, you're not being fair to your internal customers, and they're chasing targets that they don't know what. If it's based on feelings, they don't really know what they have to do, right? Which is horribly unfair to them. So
very much so. All right. Do we have any questions, Maddie? Kim?
I don't see any on the chat, but I don't know if there's another. Maddie sees any.
I don't see any on the chat either, or through Facebook. So we covered a lot of topics today. I think it went really well. Mike dropped a line in there. He said, thank you. It's been helpful.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you both. And where can they reach you if they have any questions?
Our emails are very hard. It's either khickey@autotraining.net or rjohnson@autotraining.net. Or you could find us on Facebook and send us a message, or.
Yeah.
Well, perfect.
We're easy to get a hold of.
Well, perfect. Well, thank you both, Kim and Rick, and we look forward to next month's ATI Lunch and Learn, same place, same time.
Well, thank you for having us. Bye, everybody.
Bye.